Hello, welcome to the Inside the Birds pregame show. I am Geoff Mosher alongside my Inside the Birds co-host Adam Caplan, and joining us to break down this Week 8 Eagles game against the Cincinnati Bengals at Paycor Stadium in Cincinnati is Greg Cosell. Fellas, the Eagles are 4-2 after a 28-3 win last Sunday against the Giants at MetLife Stadium. The Bengals are coming off a 21-14 win over the Browns on Sunday in Cleveland. A scheduling oddity has it, fellas, so that the Eagles and Bengals have played the same two opponents the past 2 weeks, the Browns and the Giants, just obviously in a different order. So let's talk about this game. Greg, Adam, and I have called this, and a lot of people have, a litmus test game for the Eagles, but you could probably say that for the Bengals as well. Do you agree that this is a game that you start to realize what these teams are?
It's a really big Week 8 game for both teams. We know that the division that the Bengals are in, that for them to go 3-5, again, doesn't mean they have no chance, but would be problematic given the Steelers and particularly the way the Ravens are playing right now. And for the Eagles, I mean, their division is seemingly not very good, but you never know. You had spoken about this, Geoff, that the Eagles, as we sit here today, things change in the league week to week, as we know, but as we sit here today, it does not appear that the Eagles' schedule is exceedingly difficult. So in some ways, it's a litmus test for the Eagles in the sense we want to see them improve in meaningful areas, but it may not have a huge impact on their ability to win the division.
Right. That is true. And Adam, of course, the Eagles will still have games, regardless of what happens against the Bengals. There will be more quote unquote significant litmus test games against Washington, against Pittsburgh, against Baltimore. So this is certainly not a be all to end all game, but it feels like, as Greg was alluding to, kind of the first week in a while where you're going to get the Eagles against a pretty quality opponent. The Bengals have won 3 of their last 4 games.
Yeah, I would say a proving opponent, right? That's the thing. They're certainly getting better. Greg's right. That division is so tough. Though the NFC North, who knew that all those teams would be over 500? But in fact, you mentioned the schedule. The Eagles don't play a team over 500 until week 11, when they host the Commanders. In fact, they haven't played a team over 500 since week 4. We know they got hammered at Tampa. There were reasons. They didn't play well, obviously, but they also were without a bunch of players. But this is a fun game. This is a fun game because for those of you watching who are outside of our market in Philly, Hurts has been under a lot of fire, right? The team's 4-2, but nobody's satisfied. We've broken it down with Greg, what the tape looks like. Needs to be better. They face a quarterback on the other side who's getting on a roll after a slow start in week 1, but he's been on fire. Joe Burrow's playing great. We'll get into what he looks like as a quarterback. So this is a fun game, and both teams are absolutely loaded with talent on offense.
Yes, Adam, certainly a lot of star power on both sides of scrimmage and on both teams here in this game that is a 1:00 game. Let's get to the injuries. And it's an interesting list for both teams. So the Eagles will continue to be without starting left tackle Jordan Mailata. He is missing his second game. He is on IR. He has a hamstring injury. They're also going to continue to be without tight end Dallas Goedert, also missing his second straight game with a hamstring injury. Mekhi Becton, right guard, a concussion. He is out for the game. So it looks like Tyler Steen will get the call there at right guard. And of course, Fred Johnson will get the call at left tackle. And replacing Goddard will be Grant Calcaterra for most 11 personnel snaps. And of course, Jack Stoll will also be mixed in. Other than that, all starters on defense will go, including Zach Baun, who had missed some practice earlier in the week because of a shoulder, but he did get full work in on Thursday and Friday. Nobody else carries an injury designation for the Eagles. They did put defensive tackle Byron Young on injured reserve on Friday, though. Adam, that's a pretty good, no pop-up injuries that we were really concerned about. Zach Baun obviously made a lot of people nervous there, but here we go. The Eagles are as healthy as they kind of expected to be going into this game.
Yeah, with Byron Young, look, it's too bad, man, that he never wound up playing for the Eagles, goes on IR. Look, it's not that they needed him, but Greg gave us that scouting report that was fascinating when they claimed off waivers for the Raiders. But yeah, you're right. Overall, they're in pretty good shape here. No question about it. The key is, though, the big one was Zach Baun, man, because he got hurt late in the game, and you're like, uh-oh. And he didn't practice Wednesday, which is not uncommon when a guy gets hurt, particularly a veteran. But as you said, he took all starter reps the final 2 days of practice. So that's a good sign.
There you go. Hey, Greg, last week we had Saquon Barkley against his former team go crazy, berserk, all the big runs. I think the Eagles would love Fred Johnson to channel his inner Saquon, right, against his old team, the Bengals, and play a little bit better than he did against the Giants. Kurt, no?
Well, my sense is that they'll probably have to drop back more than 20 times in this game, which is what they did last week. There were 20 dropbacks, 14 throws, but 20 dropbacks. And he's going to be going up against a really good pass rusher in Trey Hendrickson, who's not known to many the way some others are in the league who are really good pass rushers, but he's really, really tough to block. So we'll see how that plays out. Like I said, I'd be very surprised if this game were to play out where there were only 20 pass plays called.
You and me and Adam would all be shocked if that were the case. All right, the Bengals, their injury situation looked pretty bleak at the start of the week, but obviously much improved, although there was one significant one toward the end of the week that we'll get into in a second. But left tackle Orlando Brown, he was a full participant in practice on Friday. He carries no injury designation going into the game, despite the fact that he was dealing with knee-calf injury earlier in the week. And on defense, defensive tackle Chris Jenkins, who was dealing with a thumb, and safety Geno Stone, who hurt his shin in the last game. They also carry no injury designation, and they will play. At corner, though, Dax Hill remains on IR, and he's being replaced by DJ Turner. Yeah, now the big, interesting pop-up one came on Friday when T. Higgins, Adam, was a late addition to the injury report with a quad injury. So that is certainly one that is worth monitoring.
It is. Look, he life has not been good without him. Andre Ishovich would be the guy who would likely start if he can't play. And it was a quadriceps injury, which got tight in practice, so he didn't finish. So you're always worried about that. It's interesting. I thought now, and it could happen next year if they don't re-sign Higgins. But Jermaine Burton's a guy that I know a lot of people around the league liked. Greg, what did you? Well, also, we want to talk about Ishovich if Higgins can't play. But what do you remember at Jermaine Burton's tape from Alabama?
Yeah, I like Jermaine Burton a lot. To me, he's a vertical dimension. He's got great speed. He's got really good size. I thought he was a really good prospect. Things I heard about him had to do with the personality and the character, which obviously I don't know because I'm not interviewing players. But when you put on the tape, because he started at Georgia, ended up at Alabama, he was a big time recruit, had a really nice college career. He can run by people. He has got, he may not be in the category of worthy, but he has that kind of explosive vertical dimension to his game. So we'll see if he has to play more snaps. Ishovich was a very interesting guy to me when I did him coming out of college, because I did not think he dominated in college. And he's turned out to be, a pretty solid player within the context of their offense. He's obviously, when Higgins is healthy, he's the third guy. So it's not as if he's counted on to be a number one type, because Chase is clearly a top 3 or 4 receiver in the league, and Higgins is a 1A type. So Ishovich does not have to be that guy. But he's big. He can run a little bit. So to me, he's kind of in a role that fits what he is.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about what you're saying, Greg, is that he didn't dominate. You didn't see him dominate at college level.
I did not think he did.
And the college level that he played at was he played at Princeton. I don't know if everybody knows that.
That's why it was exceedingly surprising. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
But he is a big-bodied guy, and he seemingly has found a little bit of a connection with Joe Burrow in the red zone. It's where he can use that body to his advantage. Yeah. And he's a fun guy to root for. I mean, a guy from Princeton who plays slot receiver, goes by the nickname Yoshi, and he has certainly battled out there and won the starting job over over Jermaine. No,
Jermaine Burton, but they also have Charlie Jones, who they drafted a couple of years ago out of Purdue, who when they drafted him, a lot of people thought he'd be the perfect slot receiver, but obviously I guess it just hasn't worked, because he'll play some snaps here and there, but he does not play a lot of snaps on offense. Now, depending on Higgins, that could all change.
Right. Okay, let's get into this matchup. Let's start with the Eagles offense against the Bengals defense. The Eagles are the NFL's 17th ranked scoring offense, which is pretty far from where most people expected them to be almost 8 weeks into the season. They have the 9th overall offense. They are 23rd on third down, which was made worse by a 1 for 13 showing last week against the Giants, and 22nd in the red zone. As for the Bengals, they have the NFL's 20th ranked scoring defense, 23rd overall. They have not been good situationally, ranking 24th on third down and 27th in the red zone. We start with this. I know that there's been a lot of talk, guys, of, well, Saquon Barkley, big game. The Eagles should be a run-first offense. But, Adam, we've talked about this a lot. The Bengals have had a leaky secondary over the last year and a half. And when the Eagles see opportunities to strike through the air, that's where they're usually going into a game looking to strike. I don't think that mentality is going to change. And one thing that we have to keep in mind, whenever the Eagles have a game that they whether win or lose, where Devontae Smith doesn't get very involved, like last week against the Giants, it almost seems like that doesn't happen 2 weeks in a row, that they really try to get the ball to him when that happens.
Yeah, that's definitely common. I agree. There was one in particular where he had monster numbers after a game where he was very quiet. So, yeah, I could see that happening. Well, the key to me is pass protection. And let's not forget we mentioned Trey Hendrickson, number 91. Sam Hubbard, really good player, very underrated. He's number 94, who's the left end. Mm-hmm. So it's Fred Johnson. How does he hold up against his one-time former teammate? 1 year, I think they were together. Hendrickson, they crossed paths for one season when Trey came over from the Saints. So how's that going to happen? Are they going to be able to protect? If they can, Jalen wants to throw deep. And now Geno Stone, as you mentioned, is going to play. They were concerned about that, but you have DJ Turner, who now is a starting corner. They're not very deep. If something happens at the game, they got real problems. They don't have a lot of depth left. So that, you're going to spread them out. They'll do that. But now without Goddard, though, that's the thing, though. What does Jalen do? What does Jalen look for here? And what does Kellen Moore dial up here against the secondary?
Yeah, Greg, I want to ask you about the secondary and mainly the defensive philosophy of the Bengals or structure or what's happened to them, because a couple of years ago, they go to the Super Bowl, they upset Kansas City. Lou Anarumo, the defensive coordinator, is getting accolades for changing things up and confusing quarterbacks. But since the start of last year, they seem to give up a lot of big plays. What do you see from their
they have given up a lot of big plays. And well, let's start with their personnel, because Cameron Taylor-Britt has struggled this year. He's been very, very up and down, and he does not have great speed, and he can be beaten on vertical shots. And I agree with you, Jeff. I think the Eagles, regardless of how Hurts has been playing, they're going to take vertical shots, and those are outside the numbers throws. So those are not difficult throws in terms of reading coverage and reading the defense. But the Bengals are a much more predominant single high safety defense as opposed to a split safety defense. So whether it's cover 1 or cover 3, those outside the numbers shots are going to be there. And keep in mind, too, that DJ Turner basically lost his job, because last year as a rookie, he played a ton down the stretch because Dax Hill was a safety. Okay, they made the transition from safety to corner with Hill, and he won the job at corner. So Turner, the first number of weeks, was playing 5 snaps a game. And then all of a sudden Hill gets hurt and Turner has to be the starter. Now, normally they play sides. Normally Taylor-Britt plays right corner and DJ Turner plays left corner. They don't match up. So I don't think that's going to change. But keep in mind, I think that those two corners are vulnerable, and I believe that the Eagles will attack with the pass.
One question on that, Greg: if either Turner or Taylor or Britt got hurt, they have Josh Newton, who's a rookie, who a lot of teams or guys I talked to said that they felt he was more of a nickel.
Kid, yep.
Yeah, thought might be a nickel. Do you remember DJ Ivey, who was a 7th rounder last year?
I do not. I did not do him coming out. I don't really know that much.
Gotcha. He's out of Miami, but so Jeff, as we send it back to you, they've got issues. Greg just pointed it out. They got real issues at corner. We know that Cam Taylor-Britt's pretty talented, but Greg just talked about it. He gives up plays, so bombs away on your question.
Yeah. So, Greg, what do the Bengals do to compensate if they're going to play a lot of single high? I mean, they gave up 100 to McLaurin. They gave up over 100 to Zay Flowers. They gave up 83 and a touchdown to Deontay Johnson.
Yeah,
and I don't remember how they did against the Giants, but I don't think that matters much because the Giants are pretty, bad offensively. So how do they compensate?
Well, it's going to have to be they'll have to do some things purely situationally, because keep one thing in mind. You're still going to have to go into this game with the idea that stopping the run is the number one priority. So, could they play a lot more of quarters looks where safeties are closer to the line of scrimmage and do have run responsibilities? Sure, they could do that. That's not normally the way in which they play. Quarters is not a coverage they've played very much at all this year. So that doesn't mean it's not in their playbook, doesn't mean they can't play it, but that's not something that they've done a lot of.
Mhm.
So, they're going to probably have Von Bell, who's a veteran player, okay? Because Geno Stone is a deep safety. They pretty much, I would bet 95% of the time that they're in a single high structure. Stone is the post safety, and Bell is sort of a box overhang player, but he's a veteran. So he probably has a good feel for kind of disguising, jumping around, making it look like you're to the offense, like you're uncertain exactly what he's going to be doing. I've heard he's an incredibly smart player from people
Yeah.
I've talked to. So I think they'll probably use Bell as kind of that guy to maybe, show different looks pre-snap. But beyond that, their front's going to have to play really, really well, because the fact is, they're going to think first that it's Barkley we have to stop.
It's funny how similar these teams are. We talked about how they haven't met expectations, but there's still time left. They have star power at certain positions. They also both brought back safeties that were with them, left
Yeah,
them, and came back. Von Bell was with them, left for, I think, Carolina. They
yeah.
brought him back because they felt like they needed that stabilizing force in their secondary. And the Eagles did the exact same thing with CJ Gardner-Johnson. Pretty interesting.
They also could play some big nickel with Jordan Battle, who's a very big, physical, guy who can play near the line of scrimmage.
Mhm.
He's a safety, but he has linebacker traits when it comes to the size and his ability to play close to the line. Um, they play two, depending on how they want to play the Eagles, because the Eagles will line up in 12 personnel, as we know. They've been doing that quite a bit. They do play two base defenses. They play a 5-2 front, where Logan Wilson and Jermaine Pratt are the two stack backers, but they also play a 4-3 front, where they add Davis Gaither as the third linebacker, with Wilson and Pratt. If I'm not mistaken, Wilson's played the most snaps of anybody in the league. So,
Wow. Wow.
Wilson does not come off the field.
Yeah. Good player.
Look, hey, real quick, they are getting their defense has gotten absolutely annihilated against tight ends. And Njoku got them last week, 10 for 76 and a touchdown. They were their tight ends. The Browns tight ends were targeted 18 times. The Ravens scored 3 touchdowns in the air with their tight ends. Charlie Kolar in a big play, likely also scored. So that now I know Goddard's out, but maybe Calcaterra, who we know is a pretty good athlete, gets more involved. We'll see.
Yeah.
No, that's funny. So I mentioned a bunch of wide receivers that have beaten them bad. You've got a bunch of tight ends. So clearly the
Yeah.
Bengals are, as we mentioned, they're struggling in pass defense. They're
Yeah.
giving up explosives. So if you're the Eagles, you're probably thinking if we can just block up their front, which I would assume is the strength of their defense with what they have in Trey Hendrickson. They have some pretty good D tackles as well. And Sam Hubbard, as you mentioned. If you can block it up, you'll probably have some opportunities, at least for Jalen Hurts to make the big plays and see the plays on the field there. Whether he does that, we'll have to see. The one question I have, Adam, when we look at Tyler Steen stepping in and
Mm-hmm.
playing right guard, we talked about the fact that that might not really be a downgrade over Mekhi Becton because Steen has played well given the opportunity. With the litmus test being the theme here, do you think Tyler Steen has a chance to not only start for Mekhi Becton, but maybe seize that job?
It I know Steen and Greg's told us how well he's played, and he's clearly the future at that position. They drafted him to be that guy. He was beaten out soundly by Becton in training camp, but the tape's been pretty good so far. It would have to be so good where it's so obvious they have to do this. We see this at any position with coaches and respective teams when they have to make decisions. When it becomes so obvious that, oh wow, this guy was like one of our highest graded players this season, then you got to make a tough choice. And it's, Becton's been this great story, but remember, Becton was not drafted by them. He's on a 1-year deal. He's playing in a position that he had to learn in training camp. It's been a good story. Steen had to make the conversion, but he is the future, really. That's why they drafted him. We have to remember that. So on your question, if the tape is elite, why would you not change?
Greg, how would you describe Tyler Steen's tape against the Giants and then sort of compare it to just Mekhi Becton's overall performance this year?
I mean, I think Becton's played pretty well. I don't think there's been a problem with the way he's played.
Hmm.
I thought Steen, when he's gotten an opportunity, has played well. I think they've both played well. If Becton, as Adam said, you guys are more familiar with training camp than I am, clearly won the job. I would doubt that Steen, even if he plays well this week, would all of a sudden get the job. Because if Becton clearly won the job in training camp, and there really hasn't been anything when he's played that suggests he can't play or he's doing a poor job, then I would think they'd go back to Becton.
Let me ask you, what do the Bengals, if anything, do up front? Because we have seen at times the Eagles allow some free rushers to the quarterback, and clearly they struggled in pass pro last week against a very good Giants defensive front. Do you also expect any help on Fred Johnson's side? Did you see a lot of that in either chipping or a tight end there against the
Well,
Giants?
that game played out differently, obviously. I think in a normal game, they may have to consider doing that this week because
Mm.
Hendrickson is a really difficult pass rusher. He's a different kind of pass rusher, for instance, than Brian Burns. He's a power guy.
Power.
Um,
Yeah.
Leverage.
you
Yeah.
know, I don't want to say he's Nick Bosa, but his game is similar stylistically.
Hmm.
Okay,
Mm.
where he sort of initiates contact. He's strong. He can beat you physically. You really have to set your house when you pass protect, particularly if it's vertical pass sets. If it's 3rd and 9 kind of thing. That they may. My guess is they'll start without doing that and then see how it goes.
Hmm.
But also keep in mind that the one thing we know about Jalen Hurts, even when he's playing well, is he is overreactive to opposing jersey color. And if he feels that he sees him out of the corner of his eye, or he drops his eyes as he's wont to
Yeah.
do at times, then he also could leave the pocket.
Right.
So, it'll be interesting to see how they handle that. But Hendrickson is a very difficult matchup for Fred Johnson.
And how about just up front with stunting line games? Did they blitz much or put a lot of guys? Is Saquon Barkley pass pro going to be, under the microscope in this kind of game like it would be against
Mm.
somebody who does
Well,
look
they're
like the
going to
Todd
put,
Bowles?
yeah. See what they're going to do, and they do a lot of this, is they're going to put Hendrickson and Pratt in the A gaps in what we call the double mug front, where both linebackers are on each side of the center in their respective A gaps. Now they may not blitz at all, but you can't guess as to whether they're coming or not. You have to protect. So what that normally means is when they do that, that if it's Barkley in the backfield or it could be Gainwell, that they have to be involved in the protection. They've got to step inside because the way that double mug look is protected 99% of the time is the center's responsible for one and the back's responsible for the other. So you can't change your protection in the middle of the play. So the back has to at least step inside, and then if they don't come, he then can release if you so choose, but he can't be a primary route runner because he has to be initially part of the protection. You're going to see them line up both guys in those A gaps in the double mug look.
All right. So challenge for the Eagles offensive line and pass protection for sure. And then of course they're on the road. I don't know how loud it gets at Paycor Stadium, but the silent count may be in effect there, and that always causes
Yep.
its own issues.
And by the way, they're 0-3 at home. So yeah, we'll see how we'll see. You talk about being loud. We'll see how much of a home field it is for the Bengals.
I don't know. Like this is a discussion for down the road, but I feel like the as the years go by, home field advantage is no longer what it used to be. I mean, first
Things
of
are
all, the West
closer.
Coast
Yeah.
teams traveling to the East Coast, it used to be an automatic loss for the West Coast team at 1 o'clock. It's not anymore. The Seattle Seahawks have already lost 2 home games. They're one of the teams that always
And they just beat Atlanta in Atlanta.
Yeah, and then they go to Atlanta, beat Atlanta, and a 1 o'clock game, I
Yep.
think. By the way,
Right. It
so
was. Yeah.
Be a
I don't
problem.
get it. It's interesting. I feel like home field advantage is not what it used to be. Greg, I mean, do you see that as well?
Yeah, I don't follow those numbers probably the way you do, but
Mhm.
just thinking about it, yeah, you're right. And I don't have a brilliant explanation for that. I'm sure somebody does. I certainly don't.
Well,
Right.
the games are closer. Just overall,
Yeah.
they're setting records. The league is for games of 7 points or less. Oh, by the way, one thing I do want to mention before we switch sides here is that, and don't discount. They don't blitz, but they're pretty stout against the run. Usually, not always, but
Yeah.
usually with B.J. Hill and Sheldon Rankins,
Mhm.
both are particularly Rankins is well traveled, pretty good football players. And
He's a
Chris
very good player.
Jenkins,
He's just had too many injuries.
yes. Rankins has been hurt a lot. It's been around a long
Yeah.
time. But Chris Jenkins Jr. who's a guy that he probably thought he was going to be a first-round pick. He was a second-round pick, and they also drafted McKinley Jackson as well.
Kid I really liked, by the way.
Huh?
All right,
Okay.
good stuff. We will now transition to the Bengals offense versus the Eagles defense. The Bengals have the league's 10th ranked scoring offense, 13th overall. Situationally, they are 9th on third down, and they are 7th in the red zone. So this is clearly a pretty good offense that the Eagles will be facing. Now, the Eagles have all, we talked about their opponents last week. They've kind of feasted. So they are up to having the league's 6th ranked scoring defense, 9th overall. And situationally, the Eagles have the 6th best third down defense and third down, defense and red zone. They are 2nd overall. So interesting stuff there for the Eagles. So obviously, Eagles defense looking stronger last few weeks. Bengals offense looking stronger the last few weeks. Greg, philosophically, you talked about this a little bit on the show, the tape breakdown show that we do with you throughout the week. The Bengals are not afraid of certain matchups, and they like to capitalize on those. Go ahead and give a summary of what you see the Bengals usually doing when they can.
Well, Joe Burrow he's a very interesting quarterback, and he's a great quarterback when he's at his best. But Burrow is a really interesting combination of being very quick and rhythmic with his throws and taking 6-yard throws when they're there. But as soon as he sees man coverage on the outside or single high, whether it's man or zone, he becomes super aggressive. And he's got Chase, who's a top 3 or 4 receiver in the league. He's in that conversation for sure, as probably is A.J. Brown, but Chase for sure. Chase is a more explosive athlete than A.J. Brown. So if he sees one-on-one outside the numbers with Chase or Higgins, he's throwing the ball there, and he doesn't care who the corners are. So you have to be really aware of that. And, obviously Quinyon Mitchell has not, this will be a test for him, and Slade will be a test for Slade too. Slade's later in his career. He's not what he was 3 or 4 or 5 years ago. So we'll see how the Eagles choose to play it, even if they play more split safety, which they did last week, but prior to that, they played a lot more single high than many associate with Vic Fangio. But, you can't give up those plays. And the other thing about Chase is when he catches short passes, and they throw a lot of short, like I said, Burrow will throw, quick. I mean, he's a rhythmic player. Chase is a hard guy to tackle. You got to get people to him because he is phenomenal run after catch.
Greg, one question on just kind of the Bengals philosophy. Because Geoff asked you about 6-man protection. Will they keep somebody in? Because look, Burrow is not quite as bad this year. Clearly, he's not taking a lot of sacks. Other years, he's gotten sacked a lot. Will they keep an extra lineman in? Do you notice at all, or is it they're just 5-man protection?
Yeah, no. They look. Every team wants to send 5 out, but they are protection based. For instance, I mentioned that you will see the Bengals do the double mug look. When the Bengals play teams that show them the double mug look, and I'm not sure the Eagles have done it a few times this year. They could do it more. One thing the Bengals do, because they think protection first, is they will put a back or a tight end in what we call the creep alignment. In other words, he will literally be a yard behind, in between the center and the guard, but just a yard behind the line of scrimmage to make sure that those A-gap blitzers cannot be a problem for Burrow. So they think, and that's called the creep alignment because they're so close to the line of scrimmage. They think protection first. Their O-line's not that great. Burrow is the kind of quarterback, though, that's to some degree always been able to compensate for and camouflage bad O-line play because he can be very rhythmic, and he also is a better mover than, he's always been given credit for. He's actually very athletic. Just not a creator in the sense that we think of a Mahomes. I'm not even going to mention Lamar Jackson. He's in a category by himself.
Yeah.
So they do think protection first.
One more on that before we move on from their offensive line, because Marius Mims was not supposed to play this year.
Yep.
So Trent Brown got hurt. He's done for the season. They stuck Mims in there at right tackle. How's he look to you?
Up and down. There are snaps that he looks like, wow, this guy's going to be a great right tackle. And there are others where he struggles a bit, which, by the way, I think everybody expected that would be the case if he had to play a lot of snaps. but he is the starter. He's not a leaker in the sense that you can't run your offense because he's your right tackle, but he will have some snaps where he's clearly struggles a bit, you know, one-on-one. But he also has some ones where you go, wow, that's really, really good.
What did he play?
Oh,
Seven games at Georgia? Something crazy?
He
Like
started
Yeah.
8 games in college.
8 games in college. Wow.
The
he is a
game
tall
everybody
dude, man.
pointed to for him being, you know, a first-round pick was not his last year in college, but his second to last year in the playoff game against Ohio State when he played pretty much every snap and had a great game.
Hmm.
Very interesting. So, Greg, from an alignment standpoint, T. Higgins, does he play outside opposite Jamar Chase, or do they move him inside at all? I only ask that because we've seen some good Cooper DeJean play so far in place of Maddox, but we've seen it as a blitzer. We've seen him as a side-to-side tackler. I wonder if his coverage is going to get more testing this week than before. And of course, I wonder if the Bengals are trying to test him with some of their better players.
Well, they will. They move people around. You know, Chase would probably be viewed as their predominant boundary X, but Higgins lines up there as well. And they do move those guys around. So if they're in 3-by-1 or 1-by-3 sets, you could see Chase and Higgins in slot alignments to the 3 receiver side, or even if it's 2-by-2, you could see them inside. They move people around. They're not one of those teams that just lines up guys in a specific spot and that's it. So they show a lot of different looks. They get the ball to their receivers in different ways. It's a good offense. You know, so you know, that's what's going to happen, but they will line up outside for sure.
Will will he play mainly on the outside when they go 11? Or they?
No, he's part of the movement as well. So
Okay.
yeah.
Oh, okay.
They move people around.
You gave a master class in match, carry, deliver principles of Vic Fangio scheme this past week on Inside the Tape. I wonder if the next time we do that show, we're going to be highlighting the principle or the philosophy known as speed to 3, Greg, and using some from this game.
I mean, that's a great point. But here, I'll just to sort of follow up about what we're talking about. Higgins had a 25-yard TD last week on 3rd and 4 against the Browns. He was number 2 to trips. Okay, so he threw the quick slant to him. The corner was playing off. It was man coverage, but he was playing off man. Then he missed the tackle, and Higgins scored. So there he was number 2 to trips. But you know, that whole speed to at 3, you know, you could easily see Chase in number 3 to trips with Higgins the boundary X, and then if it's the boundary X and Mitchell's outside there, he's going to have to cover Higgins one-on-one, and then you got speed at 3 with Chase. So then you got to decide how you want to handle that, because the boundary safety on the side of Mitchell, which is usually Blankenship playing to the boundary, he's going to have to be very aware of Chase.
Right. So that invites our conversation about what Vic Fangio wants to do here against the Bengals and how that might be different. I think we all agree he sort of had his backbone trademark defense on display against the Giants, which is a lot of too high.
Which is what he did, you're right.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what he did against the Giants, more so than anybody he's played this year. I think he would love to be able to limit those explosives and play too high against the Bengals. But in order to do that, Adam and Greg, right, you need to make sure your front 4 is getting home if you're not going to blitz a whole lot, if you're going to keep 2 safeties deep. And so, Adam, that's where we talk about this Eagles edge rush, which I don't think any of us sit here today really convinced 100% that it's turned a corner. It's looked better. And this Bengals offensive line isn't great, but these tackles are still better than what the Giants were putting out. And the Browns were all banged up. So this will be a really big test. Can they get a front 4 rush so that Vic can do what he wants to do to limit the explosives?
Yeah, and we'll be interested to see if Huff. I know Huff hasn't been great this season. We all know that, but he's improved a little bit. We saw Nolan Smith maybe had his best game as an Eagle, because that goes on your point. They face inferior opponents. They get better. Is it real or not? Is it Memorex? We're gonna find out. And then one other thing I do want to add, because it was much bigger last year in his first season, but Chase Brown, I know for a fact, is they love him in the screen game. This kid, Sidney's brother, is really explosive. I'm fascinated. Chase Brown.
Yeah,
I'm excited. This kid is really talented.
He's a good player. He's got some juice to him. So, and they do want to run it. They're not a team. They don't want to drop back 50 times. Their O-line can't handle that. But I will say this, you're talking about the Eagles pass rush, particularly on the edge.
Yep.
The one thing about Brown and Mims, and this is a trait, they are big. They are hard to get around.
Right.
Okay. So, you talk about someone like Huff, who's essentially an edge rusher. Even Nolan Smith, because he's an athletic guy, they're hard. Those big guys with wingspans like that. I mean, I remember Mim's wingspan. I think it was over 36. I could easily pull it up and check, but I think it was like 36 and an eighth.
I mean, he's just under 6'8".
Yeah.
The guy is just enormous. I mean, no matter how you
Enormous.
slice it, I can't imagine just standing next to him. I mean, he's huge.
Now, that doesn't mean he's not beatable, but I'm just saying
Right.
that kind of size is a trait.
Right.
So
we saw, to your point, Greg, we saw Nolan Smith's first real example of a speed to power rush against the Giants, but he was doing it against a left tackle who is
Azudu.
really a
Yeah.
guard. Josh Azudu is really a guard who doesn't have tremendous traits. He doesn't have the length and the wingspan. I think this is an important game for Nolan, for even Bryce Huff, maybe even Josh Sweat, to not maybe get frustrated if they don't get home immediately and then start trying to deviate. And then it's also a game to test the patience of Vic Fangio.
Right. And the other thing too is we don't know exactly how the Bengals will come out, but there have been times they've come out and everything is quick game. And just to get completions, stay on schedule, help their O-line. So, sometimes pass rushers get frustrated when that happens because at the end of the day, they become irrelevant. If the ball comes out with 3-step drop timing, they're not getting there.
Like the Bucks game. One thing, Mims, okay, this is crazy. You mentioned the combine, 6'7" 3/4.
Okay.
340, 36 and an eighth.
Yeah.
And check this out. This wingspan's insane. 86 3/4.
Yeah.
Hands enormous, 11 1/4. I mean, holy smoke.
Yeah, I mean, that's like I said, it doesn't mean he can't be beat or he doesn't have bad snaps with balance and body control issues.
Yep.
But, sometimes those guys can still have a bad rep from a technique standpoint and they still win just because of the size. They're hard to get around.
Yep.
I would think if you would love to have a technician, a veteran, and like a Brandon Graham. I could see giving a Marius Mims some real issues because Brandon
he knows how to rush the
He
quarterback.
knows
Into his
exactly
chest.
100%. I could see a Nolan Smith, or if Jalix Hunt gets a few opportunities in this game, I could see that being a little bit different and maybe a little frustrating for them, Greg, just based on the traits alone of Amarius Mims.
Right. No, I would agree with that. I would agree.
How would you describe? Go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't want to.
No, go ahead. Jump in.
The interior of the line, their center is pretty decent, right? Karras, as far as he's played in the league for a few years, and he knows what he wants to.
I would say the weakness on their line, the guy who has bad snaps seemingly every week, and he's been a starter basically since he got there in 2022, is the left guard Cordell Volson.
Yeah, North Dakota
he's
State guy, I think.
I believe you're correct. He to me is the guy that is the quote unquote weak link in terms of one-on-one pass protection.
All right. Well, that's probably music in the ears of Jalen Carter.
Right.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Could be another big game for him.
The big question too now is Jordan Davis in this game. How does Vic Fangio and staff see the Bengals offense? Even though they're going to run the ball, the Bengals are, they're going to run the ball, but does he see it more that, hey, they're going to hurt us more with the pass? I don't know the answer to that. We know that Davis only played 12 snaps last week, and he still hasn't played one snap this year on 3rd and 6+ yards.
That's really interesting. I mean, first round pick, traded up to get him, said that eventually he's going to have all the traits. I thought his run snaps were good, but you're right. He needs to be more involved.
I mean, we're now essentially halfway through his 3rd season. And normally the way people see players is by their 3rd season, they declare what they are. So, it is, you can always be optimistic, but is Jordan Davis all of a sudden likely to become a big time pass rusher? That's not likely to happen.
Right. Now, the Eagles have been able to do this, taking him off the field, A, because he's not been an effective pass rusher, but B, they are getting an effective interior rush, not only out of Jalen Carter, but as Greg has mentioned, Milton Williams and Moro Ajomo coming on. Yeah.
So, it's really Williams and Ajomo who are going to play those snaps, I believe, when it's 3rd and long.
Adam, do you think Jomo is a guy who's going to continue to see more reps, or is Milton
Oh
Williams
yeah,
played good enough to just,
yeah.
hold that off for a little bit now? Because right now,
Well,
and
no, but
Brandon Graham on the inside has played a few snaps as well.
yeah, they have it's clear now. Jordan Davis is the odd man out. If nickel, forget it. He's not going to be on the field. It's just not it's the way it is. He's just not
Right.
normal nickel situations. Which, by the way, and also watch another thing we'll add here. Watch how Cincinnati comes out. If they're coming out at heavy 11, you're probably not going to see a lot of Jordan Davis on the field. I wouldn't think.
Now, keep one thing in mind. I'm glad you said that, Adam. This is a team in previous years, and I don't know whether why they made the change, but in the last 2-3 years, they were among the highest percentage 11 personnel offenses in the league, close to 90%. This year, again, I don't think I have a good sense as to the reason, but they are way down when it comes to that. They've become much more of a 12 personnel offense. Almost 30% of their offensive snaps through 7 games have come out of 12 personnel, where that number was maybe 10% the last 2-3 years.
And they have a lot of tight ends. Drew Sampler's their wide. Eric All, who's a guy
Who's actually
Iowa.
a very intriguing player, by the way.
Yeah.
Started his
like
career
about
at
him?
Michigan, ended at Iowa, got hurt, but he's I don't want explosive's too strong a word, but he's a very interesting receiver, and of course they have Gesicki.
Greg, when they I think they drafted All. I forget what round. Fourth round. When they drafted Eric,
which tells you what people thought of him, given that he was hurt.
Exactly. You know what? My first thought was that is a steal for them. Now, you never know how it's going to turn out, but Eric All, to your point, was supposed to be kind of the next great tight end when he went to Iowa after Hockenson, after Font, after Kittle, right? They thought he was going to be that guy. He did get hurt, but I 100%. You've already seen it this year. He can catch the ball well. He can block well. And they have Mike Gesicki there also. So you have a nice combination of a tight end who can spread you out and catch the ball, but then you have a guy who can help protect, help run in your running game, but then also can catch the ball with All. That's a nice little combination that they're able to throw at opponents.
And he's got some seam ability. I mean, he can run a little bit. So he's a very intriguing guy for their offense.
I'm interested, Jeff, is how we haven't talked about Cooper DeJean yet, because he's been really good the first 2 games as a starting nickel. I'll be interested to see because this is like if Cincinnati comes out in 11, which Greg says this year they're not doing a lot of. But if they do, are they going after DeJean? Because we talked about this on the previous show, how starting outside corners for the Eagles are probably they're going to go after him. Well, also what happens with DeJean? I'm fascinated with that one.
There's one player we didn't mention. I'm glad you mentioned that as well, Adam, who has played a lot of snaps for them the last couple of years, and that's Trenton Irwin. And you could easily see him get snaps in this game. And just my sense over these last couple of years is Burrow feels pretty comfortable throwing him the ball when he's in the game.
He hasn't really been playing very much.
I know, that's the thing, and I don't know why.
It was their previous years.
Yeah, I don't know why. I can't speak to that, but he's had good moments for them the last couple of years.
So the guy under my microscope that I'd like to talk about, poor guy, I almost feel for him, is Bryce Huff. Because if you listened to the questions that Vic Fangio has asked about the Bryce Huff, Nolan Smith edge rush, you heard Vic Fangio single out Nolan Smith, and then he made some offhand comment about Bryce Huff. Yeah, he was in there in passing situations. Like, no kidding. that was the most that Vic Fangio can get himself to say about Bryce Huff. Now, if Bryce Huff was what the Eagles thought he was going to be, like the Bryce Huff of last year, who could really edge you, I feel like he's the type of matchup that's tough for Orlando Brown, Greg. But we haven't seen that Bryce Huff yet. I mean, we've seen a couple of flashes here and there. So I wonder the leash on him. They're talking about trying to get other guys more involved in the pass rush. But if there's going to be a game wrecker, I feel like he's got the skill set to be able to beat Orlando. But again, we just haven't seen him.
But he normally lines up on the other side.
Oh, that's right. He would be on the other side. So then Nolan Smith would be.
Normally, the 2 guys who rush from the left side of the defense are Huff and Smith.
Right.
They're going to go against Mims. It's going to be Josh Sweat versus Orlando Brown. Now, Josh Sweat can beat Orlando Brown.
Then, Josh Sweat, of course.
15 times, but he can beat him.
Right.
But it's really Huff and Smith on the other side.
Right.
Greg, one thing on Orlando Brown, there were some real questions with him. how good of a player he was. What are your thoughts on Atlanta Brown since you watched him? Can't see it or hear.
Yeah, I think he's one of those guys that his size is a huge factor in what he is, because I don't think that just in terms of traits, I'm talking about technical traits, that he's great at it and he gets beat at times in pass pro, but he's so big that, it's sometimes it's hard to get around him, but he
Mhm.
can be beaten in pass protection.
All right. So we haven't really talked about Jalen Hurts because we talk about him all the time. And we talked about him a little bit on the offense, but obviously Jalen Hurts, Joe Burrow, the 4 wide receivers we talked about, a lot of star power. It is no surprise that the total for this game is 47.5. And the Bengals are, as we mentioned, 2.5-point favorites. Usually you get 3 at home if it's kind of even. So the odds makers not fully bought in to the Eagles yet, but also not fully Adam bought into the Cincinnati Bengals either.
Yeah, look, the Bengals are getting better. It's funny. People were overreacted. Oh, the Eagles are off national. They got their game flexed out. Well, it's because of the Bengals. When they did it, the Bengals' record was worse.
Right.
Bengals are still 3-4, but they're playing better. Yeah, it's interesting. This game is, to me, other than the Green Bay game, extremely fascinating. You talked about it. Litmus. In fact, I think you titled our Friday show the litmus test. It absolutely is, man, for both teams. As we move this along here, this is fun, and I'll be interested to see. And we'll get into our game picks. If Burrow's feeling it, if he's doing well, is the tempo of the passing game for the Eagles? What is Kellen Moore going to call? Is he going to be more aggressive? Will Jalen pull the trigger? That's we've seen when Hurts is in a rhythm.
They're going to go deep on the first series.
Yeah. Not only that, Greg, right? But I'm just talking overall. What's the pass volume going to be? I'm fascinated to see this.
I think that if they're going to go deep early, and I think if Jalen hits it and feels comfortable, that they're going to keep throwing. I really do. Because
I feel like both teams are going to come out trying to throw on the other. Yeah,
are beatable, and they're going to feel they can beat them. And if they start beating, and again, when I say go deep, he's not going to hit 7 50-yard bombs.
Yeah,
but I think that if they have some success, they're going to continue doing it, and they're going to see how Lou Anarumo wants to react to that. Because you can't get beat deep. He's going to have to react to it if that happens.
Sure.
So then I think they'll let Jalen continue to throw. But of course, if he reacts by really putting safeties deep and all that, they'll give it to Saquon, because then you're going to have fewer guys in the box. So that's what they're hoping. But they are going. I'm not saying they're not going to come out and give it to Saquon. There's the balance there that every coach deals with when you've got a good run game. It's what's the balance in your script in your first 15 or 20 between handing off to a great back to get him into the game versus getting your quarterback into the game and attacking the matchups that you feel are favorable on the other defense. Our good friend John DiFilippo, I remember talking with him a number of summers ago, and he said everything we build is based on the defense we're playing against. So the bottom line is they're going to attack those 2 corners, Taylor Britt on the right side and DJ Turner on the left side. But now you have to balance that with, we've got to get Saquon involved too, because we don't want to get to the second quarter with Saquon having 2 carries.
Jeff, there was a game that Flip told us about. It was when they faced Aqib Talib. It might have been with Denver.
Yep.
In the 2017 season, he had the star on his back. They were going to go after him because he was an older corner.
Right.
It moved real well. So coaches, they look at the tape, they go, bullseye. So Greg just outlined Cam Taylor-Britt. He could be a target.
Yeah, he will be.
He will. He won't. It's not might. Greg says he will be. This is fascinating.
But the next part of that equation is just what I spoke about. It's how do you balance your offense? See, that's where coaches do all their work and why they work 16, 17 hours a day, because these are easy things for us to say, and we're not wrong about what we're saying. But now you've got to put together a script and a game plan. That's a whole different animal.
And you have to see how it plays out too.
You have to see how it plays out. Yeah. And then you have to have, plan B and plan C. That's the other part of this.
And then, of course, you throw in those funky, weird freak penalties and the weird turnovers that you can't predict. That makes you just flip up everything and throw it out the window.
Right.
So I'm really excited for this our game prediction segment, more so than usual, because we never.
Are we doing that again?
We are. We never discuss before the show what we're picking. We never discuss it, and yet I usually have a pretty good feel just through my conversations with both of you where you're leaning. I can honestly say I have no idea where either of you guys are leaning toward this game prediction. So Adam, I'm going to start with you. Give me your prediction and your player of the game.
Yeah, I'm usually really good at this, but this year I've been bad. I think I only got a couple games right, but I think this is a high scoring game. I got the Bengals 24, the Eagles 27.
Okay. All right.
Wow.
I'm choosing to believe it's going to be that he's feeling it. They're going to throw. That's why I just brought up a minute ago. I think this will be a throw fest. Not that, of course, Barkley will have his runs, but I just have a feeling that there's going to be a lot of points and a lot of offense, and I cannot wait for this game.
All right. Who's your player of the game?
Oh, my player of the game is Hurts. Oh, God, I can't believe I'm doing it. But yeah, we beat him up all week, but you know what? Jalen is going to feel it in this game. I just got a feeling he's going to rise to the occasion with Burrow on the other side. Let's go. Let's see a good game.
All right, Greg, we turn to you.
I think it's going to be relatively high scoring as well. And I think it could go either way. Without any real meaningful conviction, I'm going to pick the Bengals 34-31.
Ooh, wow, that's
All
really
right.
high. I got
That
it.
is high.
I think that those Bengals corners are very attackable. And I just think that, I think back to what Adam started our conversation with Devonta Smith. And I'm not saying he's going to go 10 for 160, but he could. But I think that, I think the Eagles pass game, because of the way that Hurts can throw the ball, he can throw it outside the numbers in this game without question. And that's where he's at his best. And he's good at that. So I'm going to go 34-31 Bengals, and I'm going to pick Jamar Chase.
Ooh.
All right, Jamar Chase. There you go. It is going to be me and Greg on the same side this time. I am going to also take the Bengals to win 28-23, and I'm picking T. Higgins as my player of the game. I think they're going to move him around. I think he's going to find some pretty good matchups and
If he plays,
ultimately do the damage. Yeah, I am going to, assuming he'll play. We'll see. All right, that's going to do it for this Inside the Birds pregame show, week 8, for Greg Cosell and Adam Caplan. I'm Geoff Mosher, and make sure you catch us after the game on Inside the Birds postgame live.